There are several men in the locker room of a private club after exercising. Suddenly, a cell phone that is on one of the benches rings. A man picks it up and the following conversation ensues. "Hello? Honey, it's me. Are you at the club?" "Yes." "Great. I am at the mall, 2 blocks from where you are. I saw a beautiful mink coat. It is absolutely gorgeous. Can I buy it? What's the price?" "Only 1,500 wigs." "Well, okay, go ahead and get if you like it that much." "Ah, and I also stopped by the Mercedes dealership and saw the 2001 models. I saw one I really liked. I spoke with the salesman, and he gave me a really good price. And since we need to exchange the BMW that we bought last year—" "What price did he quote you?" "Only $60,000. "Okay, but for that price, I want it with all the options." "Great. Before we hang up, something else." "What? It might look like a lot, but I was reconciling your bank account and I stopped by the real estate agent this morning, and I saw the house we had looked at last year. It's on sale, remember? The one with a pool, English garden, acre of park area, beachfront property." "How much are they asking?" "Only $450,000. A magnificent price. And I see that we have that much in the bank to cover." "Well, then go ahead and buy it. But just bid $420,000. Okay?" "Okay, sweetie. Thanks. I'll see you later. I love you. Bye. I do too." The man hangs up, closes the phone's flap, and raises his hand while holding the phone and asks to all those present, "Does anyone know who this phone belongs to?" 1. A very large, strong-looking guy with a bad stutter goes to a counter in a department store and asks, "Where's the men's department?" The clerk behind the counter just looks at him and says nothing. The man repeats himself, "Where's the men's department?" Again, the clerk doesn't answer him. The guy asks several more times, "Where's the men's department?" And the clerk just seems to ignore him. Finally, the guy is angry and storms off. The customer who was waiting in line behind the guy asks the clerk, "Why wouldn't you answer that guy's question?" The clerk answers, "Do you think I want to get beat up?" 2. A keen country lad applied for a salesman's job at a city department store. In fact, it was the biggest store in the world. You could get anything there. The boss asked him, "Have you ever been a salesman before?" "Yes, I was a salesman in the country," said the lad. The boss liked the cut of him and said, "You can start tomorrow, and I'll come and see you when we close up." The day was long and arduous for the young man, but finally 5 o'clock came around. The boss duly fronted up and asked, "How many sales did you make today?" "1," said the young salesman. "Only 1," blurted the boss. "Most of my staff make 20 or 30 sales a day. How much was the sale worth?" $300,000, said the young man. "How did you manage that?" asked the flabbergasted boss. "Well," said the salesman, "this man came in, and I sold him a small fish hook, then a medium hook, and finally a really large hook. Then I sold him a small fishing line, a medium one, and a huge big one. I asked him where he was going fishing, and he said down the coast. I said he would probably need a boat, so I took him down to the boat department and sold him that 20-foot schooner with the twin engines. Then he said his Volkswagen probably wouldn't be able to pull it, so I took him to the car department and sold him the new deluxe cruiser." The boss took 2 steps back and asked in astonishment, You sold all that to a guy who came in for a fish hook." "No," answered the salesman. "He came in to buy a box of tampons for his wife, and I said to him, 'Your weekend's shot. You may as well go fishing.'" 3. Standing beside a valiant stallion, a beautiful blonde decides she must ride this animal despite having no previous riding experience. Soon she finds herself atop the horse's back, galloping through a lush green meadow. Unsuspecting, the horse suddenly picks up speed, and she finds herself euphoric over the freedom she is experiencing. Once again, the magnificent animal picks up speed, except this time her inexperience gets the better of her. She finds herself barely able to hang on. The startled horse is now in a dead run, and the beautiful blonde finds herself hanging off to one side of the horse, her head just inches from the ground. Catastrophe, seconds away. She begins to frantically scream for help when all of a sudden, Frank, the Walmart doorman, calmly walks up and unplugs the ride. 4. One day while on patrol, a police officer pulled over a car for speeding. He went up to the car and asked the driver to roll down her window. The first thing he noticed, besides the nice red sports car, was how hot the driver was. Blue eyes, blonde, the works. "I've pulled you over for speeding, ma'am. Could I see your driver's license?" "What's a license?" replied the blonde, instantly giving away the fact that she was as dumb as a stump. "It's usually in your wallet," replied the officer. After fumbling for a few minutes, the driver managed to find it. "Now, may I see your registration?" asked the cop. "Registration? What's that?" asked the blonde. "It's usually in your glove compartment," said the cop impatiently. After some more fumbling, she found the registration. "I'll be back in a minute," said the cop and walked back to his car. The officer called into the dispatch to run a check on the woman's license and registration. After a few moments, the dispatcher came back. Is this woman driving a red sports car?" "Yes," replied the officer. "Is she a drop-dead gorgeous blonde?" asked the dispatcher. Yes," replied the cop. "Here's what you do," said the dispatcher. "Give her the stuff back and drop your pants." "What? I can't do that. It's inappropriate," exclaimed the cop. "Trust me, just do it," said the dispatcher, a smile in his voice. So the cop goes back to the car, gives back the license and registration, and drops his pants, just as the dispatcher said. The blonde looks down and sighs. Oh no, not another breathalyzer. 5. One night a blonde nun was praying in her room when God appeared before her. "My daughter, you have pleased me greatly. Your heart is full of love for your fellow creatures, and your actions and prayers are always for the benefit of others. I have come to you, not only to thank and commend you, but to grant you anything you wish," said God. "Dear Heavenly Father, I am perfectly happy and am doing what I love. I lack for nothing. I feel content in all ways," said the nun. "There must be something you would have of me," said God. "Well, there is one thing," she said. "Just name it," said God. "It's those blonde jokes. They are so demeaning to blondes everywhere, not just to me. I would like for blonde jokes to stop." "Consider it done," said God. "Blown jokes shall be stricken from the minds of humans everywhere. But surely there is something that I could do just for you." "There is one thing, but it's really small and not worth your time," said the nun. "Name it, please," said God. "It's the M&Ms," said the nun. "They're so hard to peel." 6. At school one day, Little Johnny's teacher asks the class to use the word contagious in a sentence. Cindy raises her hand. Yes, Cindy? She answers, I was at the dentist's office with my mom, and she said not to play with the toys in the waiting room because the other kids were contagious. Very good, Cindy, the teacher said. Anyone else want to try? Samantha raises her hand. Yes, Samantha. She answers, my dad tells me not to yawn, because then everybody else yawns. He says yawning is contagious. Excellent work, Samantha. Very creative, the teacher praises. Okay, one more volunteer. Little Johnny raises his hand. Yes, Johnny? Well, he says, I was helping my dad in the yard last week, and we saw the neighbor painting his house. He was using a small brush, so I asked my dad, Daddy, why is he using such a small brush? And he says, I don't know, son, but it's gonna take that contagious. 7. A man who smelled like a distillery flopped on a subway seat next to a priest. The man's tie was stained, his face was plastered with red lipstick, and a half-empty bottle of gin was sticking out of his torn coat pocket. He opened his newspaper and began reading. After a few minutes, the disheveled guy turned to the priest and asked, Say, Father, what causes arthritis? Mister, it's caused by loose living, being with cheap, wicked women, too much alcohol, and a contempt for your fellow man. Wow, the drunk muttered, returning to his paper. The priest, thinking about what he had said, nudged the man and apologized. I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to come on so strong. How long have you had arthritis? I don't have it, Father. I was just reading here that the Pope does. 8. A blonde lived with 2 blonde roommates. She bought a new car, and on the way home from the dealer got caught in a terrible hailstorm. Her brand new car was dented all over. When she got home, she called the service department to ask what she should do. They offer to send the car to a mechanic, but she'd have to pay for it. She tells them she has absolutely no money. Couldn't they just send someone anyway? The service chief, being a prankster, told her to wait till the car was cool and then blow hard on the tailpipe, which would pop out all the dents. A half-hour later, her roomies saw her on her knees behind the car, blowing as hard as she could. They asked what the heck she was doing, and she told them, adding in a perplexed tone, "But it's not working." "You dummy," one of her blonde roommates said. "You have to roll up the windows first." 9. 3 dinosaurs are running across the desert when they stumble across a magic lamp. They rub it, and a genie appears. "I have 3 wishes, so I'll give 1 to each of you," the genie announces. The first dinosaur thinks hard. "All right," he says, "I'll have a big, juicy piece of meat." Instantly, the biggest, juiciest piece of meat he'd ever seen appears in front of him. Not to be outdone, the second dinosaur thinks even harder. "I know! I'll have a shower of meat." Immediately, huge pieces of meat rain down around him. The third dinosaur, certainly not to be outdone, thinks harder than the previous dinosaurs. "I've got it," he cries. "I want a meteor shower." 10. Michael, a handsome man, walked into a sports bar Around 9:58 p.m., he sat down next to this blonde at the bar and stared up at the TV as the 10-word news came on. The news crew was covering a story of a man on a ledge of a large building preparing to jump. Michael says, "You know what? I bet he will." The blonde replied, "Well, I bet he won't." Michael placed $30 on the bar and said, "You're on." Just as the blonde placed her money on the bar, the guy did a swan dive off of the building, falling to his death. The blonde was very upset and handed her $30 to Michael, saying, "Fair's fair. Here's your money." Michael replied, "I can't take your money. I saw this earlier on the 5 o'clock news and knew he would jump." The blonde replies, "I did too, but I didn't think he'd do it again." Michael took the money.